Hey booktubers, Lisa here. Today we're going to be talking about this book, Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Before we get into that though, I wanted to share with you something that I've been thinking of this week. I listened to this TED Talk about Find Your Why. I started asking myself, why do I do these videos about books? This is what I came up with. Let's see if you agree. Books create ideas. Ideas change the world. So let's change the world one book at a time. But now let's go back to our book, Home Before Dark. To give us a little bit of structure, I'll give you a brief overview of how this video is going to run. The first portion of this video is going to be spoiler free. Then there will come a time where I do need to talk about information that I would consider to be spoilers. I will say spoiler, I will count to 3. If you're sensitive to spoilers, that will be your cue to exit this video and come back at a later time when you read the book. So without further ado, a brief non-spoiler synopsis of this book. There is a main character, Maggie. I believe she's about in her 30s. Her father has recently passed away. Her father is a pretty well-known author because he wrote this horror story or a horror book about this spooky house about 20 years ago or 25 years ago when Maggie was 5. This family stayed at this place called Banbury Hall or Banbury Estate for 20 days before they ran for their lives in fear. Dad wrote this best-selling book. Now Dad has passed away. Maggie then finds herself inheriting this very creepy mansion. The town is not exactly thrilled with dear old Dad because the notoriety of the book. It's famous for this really creepy mansion. Maggie doesn't believe in ghosts, doesn't believe what her father wrote in the book. So she's come back to Banbury Hall. She's going to remodel it, flip it, sell it, and she wants to figure out what happened. So this is it's a classic thriller. And it's a page turner. I thought this was, in terms of page turning ability, this was just as good as Gone Girl. I would rate this a 4.5 star. I was always thinking, how is it going to, who did it? Who did it? What's the explanation? What's going on? I really enjoyed it. It seemed very realistic because you would read Maggie's present day story and then it would flip back to the book that Dad wrote. It had a much similar ring to Making a Murder or some of the podcasts out there like Serial, where you're talking to somebody in present day, then you're going back in flashbacks to some of the real evidence and trying to figure out, piece together the story. So I really like that. I also listened to the audiobook and I followed along in the book. The first time and why I picked up this book, there was another book that I read by Riley Sager. It's called Last Time I Lied. That one, I loved it. I absolutely loved Last Time I Lied, but I just listened to the audio. I didn't have a hard copy of the book. And this time I did both. And leave me a comment which one you prefer. Do you prefer audiobook? Do you prefer hard copy, or do you prefer both? And do you think it counts if you listen to an audiobook? Do you feel like you read a book? I don't know. I feel personally I enjoy the audiobooks I think more, but I feel like I don't get that credit if I'm not reading, because then you're not catching the word with the written word with how it's pronounced. So I followed along. I preferred listening to the audiobook because when I was following along in the book, I noticed that my eyes would wander to the other page. So there wasn't, if there was a surprise coming, I knew it before I landed on that page. Whereas with the audiobook, it was always a surprise. and you were just listening like you would a bedtime story. So I really enjoyed more the audiobook than the actual book, the hard copy. And now we're going to go into spoilers. So if that is something sensitive to you, spoiler alert, we're talking spoilers.
3, 2, 1.
The thing I really, really enjoy about this particular author, he offers you a clean ending. What I mean by that is there's no ambiguity who did it. You know who did it. He will flat out tell you who did it. Then what I just so much enjoy is then going back and seeing how the pieces of the puzzle fit together, and you think, oh yeah, I didn't even consider that person, and they did it. And it makes total sense now that I thought about it. The author kind of nudged me in that direction, and I was able to process it. And yes, I actually agree with what the author did. That's how I felt in Last Time I Lied. This time we were given the ending. They told us who did it. But I was so disappointed in the ending. I was thinking all the way through, because the first time, Last Time I Lied, I was completely shocked, caught off guard. So this time through, all the way through, I'm like, who did it? Who did it? Who did it? I'm trying to figure it out. And first of all, Dane. I knew right away when Maggie just hired this guy, oh, hi, I'm Dane. You need a job? No background check, nothing. I knew reading that very first section, you're gonna live to regret this. You should run a background check on your employees. I don't know of anybody I've ever worked for that didn't run a background check on me. Even a simple Google search on this guy. And then they have her, she's supposed to be this contractor, and people are popping out of this armoire, and it's boarded up when you get there and you just take it off. Maybe you should have, knocked in the back to make sure that it was, there was a backing. It wasn't, a doorway to some other place. Of course, people are gonna like pop out at you. That wasn't a surprise. He told us that. So it was supposed to be this grand reveal at the end of the book. What secret ending? Hello, everybody, anybody logical would have known, oh, if people are popping out of this armoire, somehow they're getting in there. If it's not through the front, it's through the back. It's not a surprise. That should have been a surprise to nobody. That piece wasn't surprised. Dan, I wasn't surprised when they said, oh, he has a criminal background. I got that feeling as soon as she said, you're hired, without doing any type of research into this gentleman. But I'll give you some theories on alternative endings that I was thinking that I would have been happier with as a reader if that was how the ending was. I thought that the Carter family was alive. The Carter family, there was gold or some resource on the property. They discovered it, but they needed some equipment. But they didn't have any cash. Knowing the backstory of Baneberry Hall, where creepy things have happened, the Carter family thought, we'll sell our home, get the money, and then we'll scare off the new family with these spooky occurrences. And in the meantime, Petra was caught on to the gold or whatever, and they killed her. And that's how they would tie everything together. That's why Mrs. Carter, I think it's Carver? She stuck around because her family is actually really alive. And that's why, there's this dead body, and they were spooking her parents. It would have explained everything. But they went through this. I got caught spying on Maggie, and I did this horrible thing. I killed Petra a long time ago. We knew that she was creepy, and it was so overtold this time. It was so overtold. First, they introduced the Mrs. Carver or Carter. I think her name's Marta or Martha. Marta. Marta is her name. They introduced Marta in such a creepy way. Like my red flags were up, like, oh, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look real. This looks like a person who was of interest. So she was high on my list of suspects. Then at the end, who just gives somebody a pie that you don't even know? That just seemed weird. And then said when the mom was eating the pie, this gluttonous red blob fell on the plate, and I knew it was beanberries. They talked about that so many times, like 3 times, maybe even more. We know that she was poisoned, and that was a plot hole because they never said the mom got sick at the end. Maggie got sick. Mom was just fine. In fact, she was out confessing to Chief Elcott. She ate the pie. Why isn't she sick? It did not make any sense. Ugh, it was so frustrating. The other thing, I asked on Goodreads and nobody really gave me a response, so drop me a comment if you figured this out. The record player keeps going off, and Maggie visits Hannah at the end of the book, and Hannah was the one stealing stuff from being all taking things. However, Hannah says, I didn't do it when you were there. I didn't visit you while I was there. This makes complete sense to me. Thieves usually go in when people are not there because they don't want to get caught. They're there to get an object, an object or an item. They leave, they sell it for cash. That's what they want. If they get caught and they go to if they get caught, that interferes with that plan, converting an item for cash. So I believe Hannah. I believe she had nothing to do with, why would she play the record? It doesn't make any sense. So who was playing the record? They never really answered that. Was it this Elsa person who had Alzheimer's? I don't know, but how would she remember where this record is, how to start it up? It didn't make a whole, and then she's supposed to remember to run away when Maggie, bolts up the stairs with a knife. I don't think so.
Not.
Also, it didn't make a lot of sense because if it was her, people with Alzheimer's, like, they get disoriented. They don't remember where they are. It would be weird to think that she could make her way back to the armoire and out of the house undetected and without Maggie ever knowing. It didn't seem realistic. There were also a lot of different characters in the book. I don't even know why they were characters in the book. There was the reporter, there was Chief Elcott, there was Allie, there was a stepfather. I don't know if the author was trying to introduce all these characters to give us extra suspects. However, some of them didn't make a lot of sense. Like Allie, which is Maggie's friend and business partner, possibly more. She's Maggie's age. Dad wrote the book. It wasn't her. So what was her purpose of being in the book? I don't know. Overall, again, I would still give this book a 4.5 star rating. I really enjoyed it. Tell me what you think about my theories in the comments. If you figured out who's playing the records, who and why we have all these characters in the book that don't seem to really, they're not suspects. They're mentioned, but they're not really built up in any meaningful way. Let me know if you enjoyed the book. I loved it, 4.5 star. It's the best thriller that I've read all year. Definitely go pick up your copy. If you believe that books create ideas and ideas change the world, make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Till next time, everyone, I'm Lisa of Troy. Peace.